I'm going to jump right in here if that's okay, because we are thrilled with what we have for you to take advantage of today. It's going to be a really good agenda with a change of pace and some special guests. And so we want to make sure that we get everything in. So uh, first of all, welcome back. Secondly, thank you very much for your comments on the exit tickets. It was really good to see what everybody was getting out of the first session. Really helpful to know that you feel comfortable with the situation. And we just want to restate, whenever you are not feeling comfortable or need our help, please let us know. Don't let yourself struggle at any point along the way. We want to make this completely user-friendly for you. Secondly, the focus of today's session is very much about reinforcing the main elements of the planning model, so that, and when you leave today's session, hopefully your comfort level will even be greater with what the pieces of the planning process ought to be. And you should be able to then begin at least to think about your own ideas and start to move forward, plugging in some ideas into various parts of the model. So that is the goal for today. We hope that moving forward, the way that you think about this process is that you're always keeping in mind the sorts of thoughts that you shared last week regarding your mission, regarding your best days, because those thoughts are the things that help us keep our eye on the prize. Those things comprise sort of a rubric for you of what we're shooting for. And then in terms of the framework that you're using in order to get there, that's what the model's for. So the characteristics of best days and of your mission are sort of your North Star. Those are the things that should guide you here and in your hearts. And the framework is a model for getting you to more of the days that fulfill those elements, okay? Kathy took some of the words that were generated in our last discussion and did a wordle around that. So this visual, I think, is really helpful in thinking about the North Star. So these are the sorts of things that really jumped out strongly when we talked and when you were in your breakout rooms especially. Hopefully you recognize those words because they were yours more than ours. When you look at that, is there anything that comes to mind that you wish was there and you're not seeing it? Anything that you want to add before we move on?
I'm going to make a suggestion. Would everybody, unless you've got a backhoe outside your window or something, unmute yourself and don't worry about if somebody starts to talk and you interrupt them. You know, act like you're in the classroom. We're not used to people not talking. And so I think sometimes when we're muted, we don't go ahead and talk the same way you would be if we were all together. If we had 40 people, I might not do this, but with this small group, we want to hear from you.
And because we have a crowded agenda, we want to hear from you briefly. So and jump in if you have a word or two that you would like to either add or to say, yeah, boy, of all the things that are up there, this is what's most important to me. Anybody want to contribute?
I don't think there's really anything missing. I always think of these wordles, like the bigger the word, the more often or the more importance on it is usually how it works. And so there are definitely a couple that I'm like, ooh, I wish that was bigger.
Okay, you wish was bigger.
Probably passionate would be one for sure that I wish was more prominent.
That could be done.
I don't know, curious probably too. I mean, I'd probably say all of them if I could, but you know, I mean, I don't know. Passionate definitely, that struck me as, oh gosh, I feel like that's such an important piece, and I feel like we talked about it a lot. So
Yeah, and I think what probably happened is that there must have been more mention of the outcomes than the emotions, even though you felt strongly about the emotions. So what I think maybe you're saying is that we should make those emotional words come out a little bigger.
Yeah.
I think too, when we've worked with other groups, curious or curiosity always comes through, and it's almost like they hadn't thought about it before, but when they really are intentionally thinking about those best days with kids, it's that curiosity where that leads to the aha moment or the light bulb or the other things that you talked about. And I think it's, if you think about what's going on up in the brain during this time, it's one thing for kids to take in information that you're giving them about, but when something fires up here and they become curious, then they're active learners, and that's what we're after. So I this is a evolving document as we meet, and you start to identify the things that are more strongly felt. I can make those bigger, and we can also add words. So as you experience today, think about if there's anything that you see or you hear or you experience that you also think to be on here, because this is the rubric that we're going to judge. You will judge as a part of your project plan is, am I involving kids in experiences that will lead to these things that we said were important?
Anybody else want to comment before we move on?
One
just
word I
like,
don't, oh, go ahead, Catherine.
oh, thanks, Jody. I was just going to say connections is another word that I wonder if we could talk about enlarging, because I feel like a number of us talked about that word, maybe not all using the word connection, but we talked about bridging classroom work to real life work. We talked about connecting, we talked about linking. And so I'm fearful that connection didn't come up a ton just because there's so many other words
Okay.
for it.
Great. Jody, did you have something?
Well, I wondered if we could add the word reflection.
I wish you would. That's great. That's terrific. And that is a really terrific segue into the next piece. If we can just go back to seeing their shining faces. Okay, so we're going to put you briefly into breakout groups, and you have two purposes in going in there. One is to talk with your partners about the sample project that you took a look at. You were to choose one of the three that we provided for you, one of the three sample templates. And we want you to just identify what were the elements of each project that you feel will guide those people who are implementing it towards success. Why was it a good plan? What elements did it have? And this is open book, open note too. So if you want to refer to anything in the planning model as you're looking at that, that's fine. But talk about your reactions to the project that you read about. And as you're talking, have one of the people in your group just jot down all of the elements or characteristics of successful projects. You know, what can you learn from those examples that you would want to carry into your own plan? So it's not about the specific topic. It's about the characteristics of a successful or strong project plan. Everybody clear? Okay, we will pull you back in about 12 minutes probably. So I know you'll need to work quickly, but I'm sure you can do it. You all are very observant folks, so you probably have noticed that we have a couple of guests that entered the room. Jamie Trainer and Mark Walter are here from Greensview because we wanted to have representatives from one of the model projects present while we were talking, especially when we talk about entry events. And before we get to that specific piece though, we're really curious to hear some of the things that you observed about those model projects. So some of you were talking about Jamie and Mark and Jana's project. Some of you were talking about the project We Are UA. Some of you were talking about the mental health project. but regardless of the topic, what were some of the characteristics that you identified that you feel will make those projects successful? What did you notice? Y'all can unmute, it's okay.
I guess for Deborah and I, we noticed that all three of the projects, because we did read through all of them, they all share backwards design. So
Okay.
they all have the essential question, and then they do a great job of tying in curriculum standards. They do a great job of including the community, students. So it's all really well thought out. Backwards
Just
design.
so intentional. Like that's the part. Like, yes, things evolve and they change, and as kids get their hands in things are going to switch a little bit. But there was such intentional thought in what they wanted to do and how they envisioned going about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
Mhm.
Jamie, Mark, would you say that the framework of the model helped you be intentional in that way?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Like the format of, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this is a project we haven't even actually been able to do yet,
Sure.
or like put into action with kids.
We understand.
So I feel like had we not had like the format or the framework to look at, I kind of would have just been like, oh, we're Fork Farms. We're going to look up the website, and, we would be lost without it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just to kind of add to that, I think having a template, other projects to look at, sample questions, things like that, it gets you to think about things that you might not, you might not be looking at it from that angle. It might kind of spur some other ideas, different things like that. So I love having
Good.
templates and things like that. So
The one thing too, this time I felt personally, and we simplified for this class moving forward, the first part of the plan, the big idea part, we condensed it because there was a lot of repeat things as you went through the plan. But more than ever, it struck me that people were seeing that this is a real process. Normally, if we'd say, what's your service learning project, they'd go straight to the action piece. And what you see here is some action, but you see all this other teaching that's going on. And it really is, I think, hopefully it's changing the way we look at service learning as a project to an instructional strategy.
And it's a lot of surrounding teaching by discovery on the part of the kids. I mean, part of what the template is designed to do is to make it more comfortable for the teacher to step back and be facilitator. And for a lot of you all, as highly effective elementary folks, particularly many of you, you're already good at that. But believe me, in the summer group, when it was very K-12 and very diverse, one of the things that's most challenging for teachers that we work with sometimes is to step back and let go a little bit and let the kids take the lead and play a different role than they typically play. Some of the other groups, when you were talking about the characteristics of the projects, what did you notice that we haven't talked about yet?
We talked about how it was very inclusive with different age groups or people coming together and creating that service learning project. So I thought that was very neat as part of the community aspect of how that service learning project grew from the beginning.
Good. Other observations? Hopefully you noticed when you were looking at those that in every part of the write-up, the teachers generated more ideas than they would necessarily need in the end. So that there might be 10 ideas for entry events. And in the end, once they start working with the group of kids, they would select some of those. when they were generating ideas for action, they put down everything that could conceivably make sense and work well with a group of kids, knowing that they hadn't encountered their students yet. So in most cases, with these plans turned in, there were a lot of ways to proceed when things actually got underway. But the idea in your work when you develop your template is to generate lots of possibilities, and you're not married to anything at the point that you complete the work for the class. And it's a process of creative planning and asking what if a lot, and not having to have the final answer for sure. Mark, Jamie, what was your process like when you were trying to identify entry events, particularly to get the project started?
One thing
Not now.
that was helpful, honestly, was looking at other projects as well. Listening to, got the whole crew. All right.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, you don't need to apologize. We love it.
I think, we had some ideas kind of in our minds, but we, again, looking at other projects and templates from other groups and through conversations through class and looking at past projects, it kind of opens up some new doors and ideas, because there were other similar, for this one, it's related around food and food pantries potentially and different things like that. There's other groups that were doing different but similar things. So there's some crossover there. So that was one thing that helped me.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Oh wait, am I still muted? No, I'm unmuted now. I'm sorry. And I don't know if I'm piggybacking Mark on what you said, because I had screaming in the background, but like, I feel like, and Kathy and Ellen, you both kind of said this earlier, like how some of the things are repeated or repetitive. I feel like that actually helped us. Like we would go back to entry events, and like something came about later in this framework that you then thought like, oh, like remember, like Natalie Theotto is a parent at Greensview who has a company where she like makes food that people can buy. So I don't know, we thought about like there could be like a cooking class, or there could be so many different things, and some of that stuff came about as we had other questions further down in the framework. If that makes sense.
And
adding to it.
Yeah, and building on things like at Greensview, we back when we used our cafeteria, we had PTO would do, I forget what they call it, but they and maybe they do this at the other schools, but they come in and cook like kale chips.
Tasty tidbits.
Tasty tidbits, and the kids get to taste different things. So it's like, I don't know, I thought about some of that stuff and how we could build off of things that are already happening.
Good.
But get the kids even more kind of hands-on. I mean, I think of like, we have a garden at my own house, and I mean, it's cool just to see the kids, like my own kids, just like walk by and just grab a pepper and just eat it, so it's like, kind of like, for me, it's like, how can we make that happen in the school, knowing that not every kid has that opportunity at their own house. And then it also goes to just, then you also start thinking bigger than just our own school, and thinking, okay, let's look at our community. And this is where a project like ours could go in so many different directions. But we started thinking like, okay, we know that, there's healthy eating issues and obesity and things like that in our country. And, so then we just started kind of looking on the CDC's website, and some of the data is like kind of scary. And, when you start seeing how many kids are not getting fruits and vegetables and stuff. So it just kind of starts to spiral like that. There's some great YouTube videos. That was one of the things that we can't take credit for finding it, but Katie's Crops, I think, is in there.
Katie's Crops.
And so we heard that from either you guys or another group, so just lots of different things like that.
I think it's meant to be a search for those things that you think are going to be really engaging as a hook for the kids, to gain and maintain interest in ownership. So you all know what works best for you in the classroom, and there's lots of great resources available. But I think you're getting the sense, like Kathy said a few minutes ago, that the project plan describes a journey. It doesn't describe a singular action. And
Not
yet,
like a lesson plan. Or
yeah,
it's a different kind of lesson plan.
sure. What aspects of the planning process or the template might you all want to ask these practitioners who've already been through it? Do you have any questions for them? Anything?
I feel like, and I don't, maybe they've already thought of this, but one thing that, because we did 2 different projects, we had another one called Worry Free Bear, and then this
Yeah.
one. And
Which you have to, we'll put that in our, where you got these projects, we'll put that in there too, so you can take a look at it, because it's terrific.
But something I feel like I couldn't wrap my head around, like at first, or I felt like everything was taking too long. So we started bulleting, or maybe, I don't know, maybe we had 3 of us working on one doc. So maybe somebody was bulleting and I wasn't, but I feel like just bullet your ideas and you can always go back and add more and
Yeah.
start bullets.
Yeah. Because it doesn't need to be a perfect document as you go along. You want to use it as a place to collect every possible idea, and then you can fine tune later in the process.
One thing I wanted to say too is, we're kind of drilling down on entry events during this class session. So that's here. Then there's the part up here that you started to mention about how helpful it was to see other examples, how helpful it was to talk to other teachers. In our evaluation of last summer's course, the thing that came out over and over and over again as the best part of the course was the opportunity to talk with other teachers and collaborate. And so, we want to come up with great project ideas. We want you to be able to feel like you're excited to do this and you can do it within your classroom. But we also want to make it the best instruction and easiest as we can. And one of the lessons I think we've learned is that when teachers have time to talk, great things happen. And it's very different when you think about traditional school. You've got a PD date here, you've got a after school meeting here. I think about Pam Bergen and Amanda Fountain doing the Comfort and Spirit, the Alzheimer's project. And it took us about 2 weeks to find a time that Amanda could leave Upper Arlington High School and go to Tremont. How easy is it now on Zoom to get together with somebody else? And so those are I know that doesn't seem like it should be part of this class, but it is part of this class, in that if better teaching takes place when teachers can talk, that's a problem. So how can we solve that problem? And don't lose that as, part of the story of Jamie and Mark are telling, is that when they worked together and when they were able to talk to other people, it helped their practice. And so I don't want to lose that piece.
I know that this may not have come up in your small groups, but one of the things that we would certainly add to your thinking about what makes a successful project and what really makes it high quality learning for the kids is the emphasis that you place on reflection throughout the whole process. Because if we're not taking time to see where the kids are with this, what meaning they're deriving, what roles they're assuming, how they're feeling about the project itself and about themselves and each other, we're missing a huge part of the learning potential. And so when it comes to actually beginning to grapple with reflection strategies, we'll really be interested in helping you with that. And that'll be a big part of the focus next week. The other thing I hope you noticed when you looked at these projects is that none of them was essentially about fundraising, was it? And many times before people really get into looking at what service learning can be all about, they're mostly thinking about fundraising for a cause. That's a big part of most people's picture of it. And we're talking about so much more. Is fundraising and philanthropy sometimes an element? Well, sure. And that's great if it's also surrounded by learning. But these projects were either about a different type of direct service, or they were about education and advocacy. And so keeping that broad view of the types of service learning is going to be important to your approach to your own project in the end. Mark and Jamie, do you want to give them any parting words of wisdom?
Well, I guess, yeah, just to reiterate what you just said about, as the project gets going or after the fact and things like that, just that reflection piece. I mean, there's a million things, like if we think back to Jamie and I both, worked on the Golden Bears A to Z thing. There's a million things we would do differently if we kind of were starting over from square one. It still worked, it was still successful, but lots of ways to make it even better. So, and I think, we're finding that too with the Worry-Free Bear project that we're working on now and different stuff. There's always just reflection pieces. And then I think just utilizing resources, whether it's people or within, more people to the team or, different things like that, to really get these things off the ground. We can, I guess, that's the thing with these projects, you can kind of burn out if you're taking on too much, I think. So, we were, I think in all these things that we've been doing, we've definitely had used our resources and other people and things like that to divvy stuff up. So
good. Thanks. Jamie?
I think Mark summed it up well. I mean, I've already said, but one of the biggest things I think is don't let it overwhelm you. Do like bullet point your ideas, skip a section if you can't think of anything and come back to it.
Sure.
Because as cumbersome as it can feel, I think it's all worth it to think through all of it. And
good, thanks.
All right.
Any other questions for them? Hey, you all are free to go, Jamie and Mark, but also we're about to show a video that I don't think was shown in the summer group. Do you remember seeing the tiny house project?
no.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to stay, but if you want to stay, you're welcome. So I'll leave that up to you. We're going to do that for our next piece.
I would love to, but I have a 5:15 appointment, so I do have to go. But
You look like you're still at school.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
yes, I will. See ya.
All right. So this next one that we're going to show you is just an absolutely terrific elementary project. And it clearly uses some of the terminology and elements of PBL, but it is also clearly service learning because you will be able to tell in what way that kids are being helpful to others, the way that they're using their knowledge and their skills. But the format of it is wonderful. And I want you to listen for a couple things. Earlier in the session, one of you mentioned the driving question, and you'll hear this teacher refer early on to the driving question for their project. Also, she refers directly to her entry event. Also, you will hear the kids in their behavior. You'll be able to pick out, I'm sure, the ways in which you see them really develop, not just academically, but with their social emotional learning. It's a terrific example of a well-structured project. So think about those things as we look at it together, and we'll talk about it as soon as it's done.
Can everybody see my screen? Okay.
For this project, you are going to design a home, you're going to plan a home, you're going to build a home. This project, the tiny house project, is where students are designing tiny houses. Remember, when you're going to build this, we have to think about who's living in the house, there was a boom in tiny homes, just the idea of living in one, just because in the city, the population is growing and there's more people, less room, and maybe a tiny house is more cost efficient, more green. Would you like to have your own room? Yeah. Would you like to have your own space? Yeah. Okay. The driving question was, how can we as a design team design a house for clients, taking into consideration budget and location and personal preferences? Build homes. The entry event was Minecraft. So they used Minecraft to build just a house that they would build for their family.
This is inside the house. This is where, like, the sofa, and over here is where I sleep.
They're able to use their creativity. They're able to just be free and just to build without anybody giving them parameters. Back to our project and this driving question. What do we need to know to answer this question?
Like, say they have family that's gonna come live with them. They have to think about that. Like, have a guest room.
The Minecraft
Oops, sorry.
building sparked like, how many rooms do we build? And so they came up with their need to knows. Any other need to knows you'd like to add?
You have to imagine how much it costs.
Well, we have to know like how many kids there are or how big the family is and what are those questions that you think you should ask the client. And they're like, yeah. And so we come back to the driving question, we came back to the need to knows, and we came back to their entry event just so that they can get some questions that are appropriate for their project to their clients.
What is the minimum square footage you want?
400 feet.
Do you want a second story?
Yes, second story would be good.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that'd be cool.
I think it's important for them to know that there's a real client because it gives the project more authenticity.
Would you like to have a garden outside your house?
Yes.
When they form a relationship with the client, then they start to care about what the client thinks.
This is the final product. This is what the construction documents look like. But not too different from that concept drawing, right? We have the bedrooms up here, master bedroom in the corner.
So I asked an expert to come and present to the students, and he was actually a structural engineer.
You're gonna see elevations, just kind of look at what kind of information's on there. How do you tell a wall is a wall? You can see you put two lines parallel to one another.
And we talked about making blueprints and what does that look like, or having a layout.
I like it. It even has fence right here. I love this.
These are called elevations.
I think they were really excited about seeing the blueprints because it was just real things that they can hold, they can touch, and they can see, and they know that engineers touched it and any engineers made this, and this is what we're going to do. All right, we're gonna move into our next rotation. On this side, we have front row and RAS kids for listening to reading and answering comprehension questions. So as we plan the project, we think about the standards that we're going to be using. In this project, we're using opinion writing or reading of informational text, and we integrate that into like a daily rotation of in English language arts. So this is an article from NASA, and it's called Tiny House Fun. If you have something you want to highlight, like you want to get back to, or a word that you really don't understand and you want to learn more about that, you can highlight some words. So on that day, I had a group and we were looking at informational reading. And then another group, they were listening to a book that had to do with houses. And then another group was working on vocabulary, and all the vocabulary is part of the project. And then another group was just doing their read to self, and that's just books that they're interested in, so they're practicing reading independently. Write your name at the top. For math rotations, we call it math with the teacher, math with technology, and math with the partner. The house size that your client wanted. And then I'm working with the group, and we're really looking at area and perimeter and the difference between area and perimeter. Okay, so can you tell me what the square units are here? Another activity that we did with math was the Cheez-Its math. When they looked at square footage, we said that each Cheez-Its was 1 square inch, and they used that kind of information to do square footage within a house. It was just kind of a connection for them. To help them refine their designs of their homes, students went through a feedback protocol.
I turned the bathtub from here to here because I know that you can't get through the twin if you use like that. There's the bathroom with the shower. Yeah.
They were paired up with another group, and they presented their models, they presented their blueprints and their layout, and they talked about what was in the house and who their client was, just to get some feedback from their peers.
Our client is Miss Pena. Her age is 39. Her budget is $40,000.
Within the fishbowl protocol, what we did was, me and another teacher, we sat in front of a presenting group and everyone else looked around us, just like a fishbowl where they're not to talk, they're not to say anything, they're just really listening and seeing the interaction between the presenter and the guest.
I like how you do go into the living room, but maybe push the bedroom in the back. And then, so then that way she has more privacy. And
the purpose of looking at that interaction between the audience and the presenter is so you can think about questions, you can think about behavior within the meeting. And so they can use that as a model for when they go back to their groups.
This is the laundry area, and then here's the pantry to store all the clothes. Right here we have a little office.
We practice different ways to present to their clients. We talk about eye contact, we talk about confidence, we talk about postures, we talk about volume of your voice.
Hello, my name is America. Hello, my name is Christopher. And the title of our project is Tiny Houses. Our driving question of this project is, given a budget, how can we as a design team plan a home for a family?
The last day of this journey is for them to really present their work to their clients. And they were so excited.
Did you have a hard time building the house?
Kind of, yeah. We had to redo some of the walls so that they were the exact measurement. There's the master bedroom. The middle is the kitchen. Here's a room.
They shared their blueprints, they shared their layout, they shared their budget, and they shared their opinion paragraphs that they wrote so that they can try to persuade their client to purchase their home.
What do you think the kids got out of that, and how are they different?
Just the engagement in their own learning. Yeah, I mean, you could just see as soon as it was like, okay, I'm presenting to the, to the customer, like all of a sudden it just becomes that, I don't know, it becomes real, and they want to do a good job. It's that passionate piece that we talked about in the beginning that I just think is such a big part of it.
It is. What other benefits do you see?
How that they were motivated, like intrinsically motivated to do quality work and take their time. And
as soon as it's really for somebody real, it makes a huge difference, doesn't it? And the clients, of course, did not necessarily commit to buy the house, but the clients committed to incorporate a couple of the ideas that they liked best that were generated by the kids. And then there was communication after the fact about how those ideas were incorporated into the real home. So there were real outcomes from it.
And I think, when we're thinking on this level, and then we're also thinking on this level, that whole thing about intrinsically motivated. I mean, to me, if curiosity is a big word, intrinsically motivated is another big word, because I can't tell you how many, and maybe you experience it a lot earlier than this, but high school teachers, we hear often, all they care about is the grade. If they care, all they care about is the grade. Like, that's the deal. Kids are only going to care about the grade. And yet when they're engaged in this kind of learning at the high school level, the kids do their best work and not for the grade. So if we know that to be true, we need to be intentional about that. And I think about when my own kids were in 7th grade, they had a wonderful math teacher. She was wonderful. And she'd do fun things that really engaged the kids. And I can remember them building a house in math class with popsicle sticks. And it was fun. They worked hard. They did it. They got to choose their own house. It was hands-on, and they were engaged. And then they would walk home, the parent would come see it. We were the audience. They'd walk home and invariably it would fall apart before they got it home. And I think about the difference, just that little tweak. If you think about this project, that little tweak was an authentic audience, somebody who really wanted a little house. It was totally different experience because you went from it being authentic and hands-on and kids being engaged to that intrinsic motivation, that emotional engagement that takes it to another level.
Do you think those kids are gained confidence through that experience? Because there's a lot of practice for being public with their ideas and getting ready for something authentic.
And that was part of the curriculum for her. She treated it as part of the curriculum. It wasn't like, okay, you're going to present. She intentionally gave them experiences and knowledge ahead of time so that they would become more confident. That was a goal and an end that she wanted.
So you heard the driving question, you heard her reference to the entry event, and I think using Minecraft was probably genius to get them engaged. You saw the curriculum connections very clearly. She was using expert groups when she rotated the kids through math and language arts. All of the pieces, including demonstration and celebration at the end. So all the pieces of the model are really clear. Any other questions or comments about that one?
One of the things that I loved was that she kept saying, we keep going back to the need to knows. And I don't know, elementary teachers, that may be a phrase you all use all the time. It is not one that I commonly hear at the middle school level. And I think it's such a great way to phrase that, you know, because it doesn't stop the learning. It's opening the door to continue learning when you phrase it, what's our next need to know, or what are our other need to knows? So I really liked that. And I loved her direct instruction on how to be listeners. You do it by observing, you do it by making eye contact. I think we expect a lot that our students know what it means to be a good listener and the value of listening and of observing others. And I loved that she built that in multiple different ways in the project.
Yeah, and think about, they declare up front what they're going to do. The action is going to be to build tiny homes for real clients, okay? And so from the outset, if you picture our planning model, the action piece is clearly declared. And then remember how last week we talked about you then backfill in the preparation and planning piece and build in what the kids need to know and be able to do in order to successfully complete their shared mission. And so all that language arts, math, presenting skills, all of that is put into the preparation and planning phase because that's the stuff they need to know in order to be successful with the action. It's a good demonstration of how that doesn't necessarily work in the time sequence that looks from the visual.
Catherine, you can maybe answer this, and then the elementary teachers. And Lori, you're at the middle school too, right? Aren't you at middle school? And so I keep thinking about what Jamie and Mark said was, you know, you can sometimes get overwhelmed with this. And part of it is, I think, a lot of times teachers want, you're doers. So you're going to do everything. You're going to find all the websites, you're going to find all the literature or the informational texts that the kids are going to do. And watching this, I thought, what a good partner a middle school reading teacher could be with that teacher when they needed some informational texts for her third graders, that the middle school kids who often look at being in a reading class as not a badge of honor, if they were the teaching assistants, finding those informational texts as a way of increasing their reading ability, they would be role models to those elementary kids. So, and it would save the teacher some work at the same time. So, you know, if we can think of ways to reach out, as Mark said, looking for other partners, using the resources, you may fill your own need and help another teacher meet their goals as well, and be a really good partner.
Any other questions or comments that you have on that particular video? Anybody?
I don't have a question about the video, but I do have a question for you two. Like, in a perfect world, how many of these projects would you envision teachers to be able to do throughout a school year?
Let me answer that a different way. We have known practitioners over the years that are very committed to and very good at service learning and PBL. And I would say they might do a project, not of grand scale necessarily, but they might be involved in an initiative anywhere from, I would say 3 or 4 times a year. Okay. So they might take a piece of their curriculum, or if you're elementary, pieces from several curriculum categories interwoven, and work with those in a more authentic way in each grading period. But the perfect world that I would describe is that the teacher just gets better and more comfortable with bringing the curriculum to life throughout the year. And it doesn't mean that it always has to result in a project, but it means that you begin to interact with the kids in ways that make it less likely that they're going to ask you why they have to learn this. There's going to be connections to the real world in an ongoing basis, and things are going to be more active and interactive more often. And so as Kathy cites the story, we worked with a group of folks out.
I was going to tell that story.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, the teacher just said after several days of training, he said, so sometimes I can do projects and sometimes I can just be more PBL-ish. And that's really right. You just begin to think about how can when do I really need to remain the instructor? And when can I play a different role and let kids discover more and lead more?
Yeah, I might say I'd be thrilled if teachers thought of this as, I'm going to do one project. And the entire year, I'm going to look at how I can connect as many of my standards to that project as possible. For that teacher, it's possible that was her project. I think when we think about the action piece, then we start thinking about, well, we've got to do, 2 projects, or do we have to do 3 or 4? I think when you look at your curriculum and you think about how can this 9 weeks, how can I bring this curriculum to life, whatever it is we're trying to teach. But also maybe in her course of study or how it's set up, maybe listening skills was in the first 9 weeks and they're doing the house in the last 9 weeks. Well, you don't want to teach those listening skills in isolation of, the reason we're teaching them is because it's in the curriculum. The reason that we're teaching them is because down the road, you're going to need to interview people and you're going to need to listen to what their needs are. And so these are the skills. So I guess I'd rather a teacher think about this as, this is the way I teach, versus it's December, we're going to do a food drive. How can we make the food drive the best that we can? Teachers who really use this as an instructional strategy, maybe because of the curriculum and the things that they're doing or what's happening in the news, they do a project in first semester or the first 9 weeks, and then other needs arise. And so then you move to that. So I wish I could tell you it's You're great if you do one, or you're great if you do 12. But
Start with something manageable that you're excited about and see where that takes you. And it will speak to you professionally if it's successful. That's really what I believe. Start with one if you've never done one before. Start with one, build it in a way that you're excited about and that kids are excited about. And many of the benefits and style points of it will carry over for you, I'm sure.
When I taught 7th grade, one of the things I had to teach was poetry, and I hated poetry. I was no good. I felt like I was no good at it. And then to teach it, I didn't have a love at that point of poetry. And so it was my curriculum. And I probably just taught it like that. Well, now, if I had a magic wand, if it was a perfect world and I could go back and change that, I probably would have had a partnership with a local retirement village and had my kids develop cards that use their poetry to somebody that they actually met at the retirement home and cared about. That would be a better, is that a big project? It isn't. It's a tweak of how it changed the way I looked at teaching poetry, if that makes any sense.
It does.
And a lot of projects are very successful and meaningful without being as elaborate as tiny homes. So, don't be overwhelmed by some of the examples. We pick things that exemplify most of the elements done really well, but it is fine to start in a smaller way. It really is.
I was just going to add, when the district looked at putting service learning into our strategic plan, the goal way back then was if every teacher and every student were involved in one quality service learning project a year, the district would see that as a huge win. And so if there's a year that you might not be teaching one that you consider high quality, or you're still in the development stage, maybe students would get that from another one of their teachers in a special area or somewhere else. And that was always really reassuring for me, because then I didn't feel so much pressure. It was like, if the goal is every teacher, every student maybe being in one a year, I felt like there was some comfort in that. I don't know if that helps anybody, but it helped me.
It helped me too. Like, just that's how, when I started, that was the standard. Like, every year, every student participates in one service learning project, which I think if you're a middle school, high school teacher, kind of takes the pressure off a little bit, because those kids aren't only with you. Like, if you're working together, it might be through social studies, it might be through art, it might be different ways. But as an elementary teacher, I always knew that was like, everybody had to have one service learning project. And I don't think that standard is being communicated as well as maybe Catherine and I heard it a while back.
Well, and I think maybe that will be revisited and communicated in a different way. I don't know. What I feel pretty strongly about, though, is that even if you're not the one providing the main experience to the kids in a given year, I hope that as a teacher, you can still see the benefits of becoming more PBL-ish. Because when we know darn well that there are lots of kids that are not fully engaged in what we're doing in the classroom on a daily basis, sometimes they are, but many times they're not. We need to ask ourselves, what can we do to make each day more relevant and exciting for the kids? And sometimes it's just an adjustment in technique. It doesn't have to all be project driven. But, it also can't be okay to do same old if same old isn't working well. So.
Yeah. And I think and this is a bigger discussion at another time, I'm sure, because Ellen's trying to get me to move on, and I promise I will quickly. But it's one thing to say, and it was a great place to start with the district. That was a huge commitment when they said every student every year. But it is different than saying what are the best practices in instruction? And if you're telling me that the best days are when kids are emotionally engaged, they're collaborating, they have intrinsic reward, motivation and those things, then we have to look at our instructional practice, our teaching practice, and say, how can we build more of those things intentionally? And it isn't about getting the kids more service hours. It is all about instruction of what do you know works best with kids, and how can we do that more often? And how can the district make it easier for you to do that more often? And so I hope as a district, and I felt last spring when we were working with all the buildings when they did the best days and the kid figures, there were people that said, we can't get those kids, we can't have those days without service learning. So I guess my question would be, why would we teach more traditionally, September, October, November, do a service learning project in December, and then teach more traditionally January through June? And I don't want to be Pollyannish. I am Pollyannish. But I think that's what we're striving for, is just as Ellen said, how can we be a little more every day, each and every day, how can we look to be more PBL-ish, which is easier to say than service learning-ish, and keep our eyes on that rubric of the best days that you are creating.
I'm going to modify the agenda because we were going to go to breakout rooms a second time. And I think by the time you got there and back, you would be in the middle of sentence number one. There just wouldn't be the time. So let's do this a little differently. I'm really curious whether some of you have thought about a potential topic that you might want to play with in your project design. And that doesn't mean, yeah, I'm going to for sure 100% own doing this with the kids, but what kinds of topics or issues are you gravitating toward as possibilities? And anybody given that some thought so far?
I had an initial idea that I'm now rethinking. And before I tell you, I'm wondering if there are any examples that you can think of that might fit into a model that looks more similar to what my school year looks like. Because I love these big overarching projects that can kind of, evolve over the course of the school year. But I unfortunately don't have that kind of time with my students. So I guess now seeing a lot of these examples, and then, over the course of last week, reading those examples, I'm just trying to think of something meaningful that can take place within the 9-week period that I teach. And I don't have the entire student body as well. So that makes collaboration a little tricky sometimes. And I teach all 3 grade levels. So I'd love some advice on that if you have any.
Let me take one bit of pressure off of everybody's shoulders. I agree with you that you have to look for something within your own time frame. And I don't necessarily agree with Kathy. This won't be the first or last time you see this, but I don't necessarily agree with her about integrating everything over the course of a year, because I'm afraid of losing momentum, because I just don't know that is realistic. I do agree with her that when you know what action you're headed toward, you can, leading up to it, do a lot of more relevant teaching that ties into the project. I get that, but I would say all of the examples that you have seen, everything that you've read about, everything that we've done in the video, was short enough time frame that it would fit in a grading period. Now, I can't automatically solve the issue of which kids you're seeing, but let's assume that many of the well-structured projects that you all are seeing are anywhere from 2 or 3 weeks to the grading period. Okay, but they're not extending over longer periods of time than that. So don't get overwhelmed by the time frame. What was the idea you were playing with?
Well, this year, and haven't been able to implement it quite the way I wanted to, but I decided to focus a lot of my instruction around using art as a time for kids to relax, and be with their friends and reduce their anxiety and stress levels, because I think they all need that this year. And then I thought, well, wouldn't that be neat if we looked at that and branched out and then created an activity that others could use to help reduce their stress levels and anxiety, maybe in another grade level, or just outside of the school in general, maybe, I don't know. But that was my initial idea. And it looks like there are other teachers in the district who've centered their topics around mental health as well. So there might be some great resources there.
Absolutely. All right. Can we have a round of applause, please? Because she didn't know it, but she has a really good idea for sure. Okay. So this doesn't mean that you have to keep it, but it can work.
Okay.
And we can help you as you develop it. Think about the authentic audiences that could benefit from what your kids develop, because I can see you doing it in such a way that elementary classes can use it. I can see where you could develop relaxation techniques that would work with older populations. I mean, there's lots of possibilities for who you might be developing it for. And I think it could be really empowering for kids. And it's also a chance for them. Sometimes there are career development and career exploration opportunities with many of these projects too. So helping your kids understand a little bit more about art therapy as a part of this could be really good too. So
yeah.
And I'm gonna open this up to some other ideas. I don't want to spend 100% of the time any one place before we quit today, but we can help you in the development of this, and the other people in the class definitely can as well. Did you want to make a comment?
I want to. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Can you tell what it is?
The Grinch.
Good. Okay. So my 7-year-old first grade granddaughter drew that, which of course I think it's like Picasso. But I said, Dolly, how did you know to do that? And my daughter said she's watching a video on how to draw. There's somebody. Your kids could create that for elementary kids.
Yeah.
And they would.
I was thinking along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you don't have to, solve world peace or hunger. But it's just what Ellen said. What are your kids learning that somebody else could use? And they would love your kids' work.
Absolutely. By the way, her granddaughter's name is Dolly, and because she likes art and because Dolly's mother was an art history major, we sometimes call her Salvador Dali.
That's so cute. I love that name.
Somebody else, what's a topic that you're headed toward? Michelle, I know you had an initial leaning.
Yeah, so the topic is kind of around elderly. I mean, I was so inspired by Pam Bergen's project that she did, and just looking at, the elderly and the pandemic that we're in, and how they're losing that emotional connection with grandchildren, and not just the elderly, but what are the children missing out as well. And then when Deb and I were in a breakout room, she really kind of helped as well, help me process, some of the questions to look into, like cultures, studying other cultures throughout the world, and how, grandparents are respected and revered. And then looking at our culture, and are the elderly as revered and respected. So those are just kind of my initial thoughts. And then I've been writing down different ties with the curriculum, like informational texts, opinion writing. We also study immigration in 4th grade. So thinking about ties through cultures that way. So I've just been kind of jotting notes throughout class.
Great. That's great. And I had offered, I mentioned that we could brainstorm at a point that you want to do that. When I was first a service learning practitioner, my area of concentration was on projects with older adults. So I've got a lot to share if it's useful to you.
Yes, I'll
And down my mold as
definitely.
well.
Yes. Well, I definitely do want to set up a Zoom time with you and to get some ideas going with essential questions and get going with that.
And Deb, if you want to be part of that as well, you're welcome. You don't have to, but I know that was one of the things you hoped you might do with this group.
I would say one of my favorite things to do is really the opportunity to brainstorm with teachers, and I know their, at least elementary, I know their curriculum pretty well across the board. So for me to sit down with Michelle and just, she's like, I'm just worried. I don't know if I know what I want to do. And I'm like, just talk to me. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me where you're going. And then that conversation kind of evolved into something that I feel like she's comfortable with.
Good.
It has a direction to go and feels that tie to what she's doing. So to me, that's my favorite thing to do, because implementing these projects are not something that in my position I get to do that often. So I'm happy to brainstorm with anybody. It is definitely something I love to do, and luckily it's a strength too.
Yeah, that was very helpful. So thank you.
I love it too.
If you want to partner around cultures, different cultures and immigration, we've got contacts in Gadsden, New Mexico, which borders Juarez, and it's like 100% Hispanic, and they are wonderful teachers and the stories they have. But you know, it'd be fun to pair kids from there with your kids.
It would be.
Yeah. And anybody else got a topic that you're contemplating that you want to share at this point?
I'm contemplating. I haven't given it a lot of thought.
That's okay.
But, I have just a really unique group of kids this year. Well, this year and last year, because I looped with them. And we have one of our classmates is of special needs, and my kids adore her. And she doesn't speak, but she has a talker. And I'm just trying to think about what I can do almost, with typically developing children and how they can be that catalyst of learning for a non-typical developing child, nonverbal.
Sure.
I don't know though. I haven't really tossed around enough to think what direction it could go, but maybe that connection between the special needs kids and then the kids in my classroom. I mean,
Jody,
it's been a little bit of a harder year only because she comes in for morning meeting, and then a child or two will go and eat lunch with her, but just from group one. And then they were trying to do kind of a buddy thing over Zoom. So I don't know, just thinking about that.
I'm going to suggest this, and it's an interesting transition also to one of the things that you all will do as an assignment between now and when we meet again in 2 weeks. But you're going to look at the videotape of our summer classes interaction with 2 high school teachers that are really good service learning practitioners. And one of them is Kim Wilson, who is the multi-handicapped teacher at the high school. And she might be a really good resource for thinking about possibilities for what you have in mind. She's very creative, she's very resourceful, and she knows a lot about the needs of kids like you are partnering with. And so when you watch her on tape talking about her experiences, if you want us to connect you with her, we would be glad to do that. And I know that she would be helpful for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else want to mention anything before we talk about the assignments for next time? Okay, so we have a break. We won't have a session next week. The next time we meet will be in 2 weeks. And that's why the recommended assignments are a little bit more involved or comprehensive than usual. And that will help you log some of the hours that you need for the Ashland credit anyway, those of you that are pursuing that. On the assignments are listed on page 2 of your handouts. And so you'll see that the first one that's mentioned is looking at the video of Kim and Leah. And I think that will be really helpful to you. Secondly, in your materials, there is a multiple intelligences activity called How Are You Smart? We would like you to complete that before you come to us the next time and bring it with you so that you can kind of hold it up in breakout room with your partners and so forth and see each other's results. And we're going to incorporate that into a discussion of how you can utilize multiple intelligences in various parts of your project if you choose to do that. We want you to keep thinking about possible ideas, and at the very least, and you don't have to own your idea yet, but at least pick one potential topic and begin to think at least about entry events that would make sense in getting kids excited about that topic if that's something that you pursue. And within your materials, there are examples of what sorts of experiences we mean by entry events. And so I think that will help with some ideas along with some of the examples from last summer's group. We also enclosed in the materials in Google Classroom, there it is a set of reflection resources. And you can begin to explore those. We're not expecting mastery of that, but just look at what's there because there are sample strategies, there are sample reflection prompts, and I'm sure that you have some of your own that you have used in other work with kids. And then, of course, your exit ticket. So I don't think this will be too cumbersome for you, and I think you'll enjoy everything that is a part of that list. Anybody got questions at all?
I want to say something about Ashland Credit real quickly. You've gotten about 42 emails from me about Ashland Credit lately. I apologize. What happened was initially because Upper Arlington's a sponsoring school district for this course, when they gave me the instructions for registration online, they used Upper Arlington. Well, because then they realized that, you know, not everybody was from Upper Arlington, so they switched it so that the district login is PMD and the PIN is PMD. So I hope everybody got that message. If you have any issues registering, let me know and we'll work it out. But I think, and if it automatically, if you'd already tried to do it through UA and you get back on, if it automatically sends you into UA, you'll have to log out and then log back in as PMD. Does that make sense? Has anybody registered yet and it worked? Okay, all right, great.
Do you have your doctorate yet as a result?
Is the title of the course when, like, I clicked on once and the title looked different? It wasn't making it irresistible.
It's there now, Jody.
Is it there now?
Yeah, yeah. That's even after she said that that's what it was. When I got on, it was just Engaging Hearts and Minds. That's our other course, and so I contacted her again, and so it's showing up now. Is that right? Okay.
I registered today and I didn't have any issues.
Good. Okay.
Glad.
When we have a break like this in the schedule and there's a couple weeks between sessions, it's a great opportunity if you want us to Zoom with you to brainstorm or support your planning in some way. It's a good opportunity to do that. So feel free to just shoot us an email with some suggested times and we'll work out whatever help we can. And I know Deb feels the same, and we can do that independently or as a team, but we're here for you for whatever will help you feel more successful more quickly.
And if you decide you're going to have a partner and they're willing to get on as well, The more the merrier.
Everybody okay with where we are so far? We think you're doing well, but we hope you feel good about it as well. All right. See you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.